Well, thanks for joining me in the last of the series of the I am sayings of Jesus in John's Gospel. Today I want to read from John chapter 18, and this is the last week of Jesus' ministry in Jerusalem before he is crucified. It's the time of the Passover, and it actually takes place the day that he was going to be crucified, the day that the Lamb was to be slain. And so in John chapter 18, beginning at verse 28, we read, "Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, 'What charges are you bringing against this man?' 'If he were not a criminal,' they replied, 'we would not have handed him over to you.' Pilate said, 'Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law.' 'But we have no right to execute anyone,' the Jews objected. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Because they stoned Philip in just a few weeks, actually, after this, probably. So John says this happened so that the words Jesus had spoken indicating the kind of death he was going to die would be fulfilled. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'Is that your own idea?' Jesus asked, 'or did others talk to you about me?' 'Am I a Jew?' Pilate replied. 'It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you have done?' Jesus said, 'My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place.' 'You are a king, then,' said Pilate. Jesus answered, 'You are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me.' 'What is truth?' Pilate asked. With this he went out again to the Jews and said, 'I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?' They shouted back, 'No, not him. Give us Barabbas.' Now Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion." A little side note is that Barabbas' first name was Jesus. Jesus Barabbas, son of Father. Wow, what a very, very interesting thing. So I want to take a look at this and ask the simple question, what do you do with a king? It doesn't matter whether you're Pilate or Herod or just the common people around at the time of Christ in the Galilee. What do you do with a king? So here we are looking at this and thinking about it, and thanks for joining me today in the process here. Can't get the computer to change yet. Let's get it going here. So what we see in this picture is obviously Jesus is on trial. Here he's on trial before Pilate. During the night, in an illegal meeting by the Jewish Sanhedrin, he had been tried by the Jewish leaders, the Sanhedrin. That's the ruling body of the Jewish people. They had not given notice 24 hours, and it was actually 24 hours before a holiday, and there's just a whole series of reasons why it was an illegal meeting. Well, it's the only way they could get things to happen that weren't right. What we notice here, however, is that Jesus allowed himself to be taken before Pilate and to be tried. He didn't resist in any way from the time they arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane and took him, and the Gospels vary in the story, but he's bounced around from Pilate to Herod and back to Pilate. Now I want you to understand that Jesus had been approved as a Passover lamb. There is a tower in the fields out near Bethlehem And in those days, apparently, priests were stationed in the tower and they inspected lambs that were born. And if a lamb was good enough, in other words, if a lamb was perfect and was worthy of being a Passover lamb, they would wrap it in strips of cloth, probably from the old garments of the priests. And that's the code. When the angel said to the shepherds, "You will find Jesus wrapped in swaddling clothes." So you see, he was the Passover lamb. And only these shepherds who were professionals at this would have recognized that this was the Passover lamb, the lamb slain from the foundation of the earth. Oh, Jesus had also been tried by the people at large. They had listened to him, they had thought about him, they had seen his miracles, and they had approved him as a righteous one. And now he's being tested by the government officials. And it's interesting that in all of the various circles of influence, Jesus is tried to see if he's authentic, to see if he is perfect, to see if he really is fit to be a Passover lamb. So here he comes before Pilate. And while they are together, Jesus actually tested Pilate's sincerity in his quest for truth. So Jesus looked at Pilate and asked him, when Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "Is that your idea? Is that your own idea? Or did others talk to you about me?" Well, Pilate is struggling to find out, so Jesus gives him enough information for him to make a judgment, a legal judgment, a right judgment. So Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight for me." Well, wait a minute. What a beautiful concept here. If my kingdom were of this world, people would take up swords and fight, like Peter tried to do, of course, to prevent the Jews from arresting me. But Jesus said, "But now my kingdom is from another place." Okay, so Jesus allows himself to be put on trial. In every venue, in every situation, for everyone in his circle of influence, he allows himself to be tried. So he did that with Pilate, and then now he does it with you and me. And there's a sense in it which he will test our sincerity as well. He'll give us, if we're an honest seeker, enough evidence by which to make a good decision, to make a moral judgment. But eventually the tables turn. Eventually, when we're honestly seeking to know who Jesus is, we are put on trial. So at the point where Pilate had evidence enough that Jesus was who he said he was, and history tells us that his wife had warned him also, that's mentioned in the gospel, Pilate found himself on trial. The same thing happens to each of us. If we come sincerely looking at who Jesus is, there's evidence enough, but at some point the tables turn and we find ourselves on trial. And each of us must decide what to do with Jesus. That ultimately is the significant question in life. That's what life is all about. The purpose of it is to decide whose side we're going to be on, whose kingdom we're going to be a part of, and where we're going to spend eternity, of course. So, option one for us and for Pilate, for anyone for that matter, is denial. Okay, any one of us could deny that Jesus is a king. And we might claim that we just don't believe in a spiritual realm, that this whole idea of something spiritual is no longer scientific or real. And so we could take that route. Or we might pretend that this is an unknowable. You just can't really know. Some say this and some say that, and there's confusion. Yeah, a lot of people like to play that little game. Or we might plead that there's not enough evidence or information for us, and so we keep reading and we keep asking and we keep struggling. Generally it's because we don't want to deal with our sinfulness and our need for a Savior. So we'd like to shirk it off, but the truth of the matter is, we cannot wash our hands of this. Every one of us ultimately has to make a decision. So, denial. To deny that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, is irresponsible. It's a form of escape from the hard work of making a moral decision. Actually, it serves as a mask for refusing to accept him and his rule in our lives. Another option is what we would call tolerance. And we could say very simply, well, okay, we can allow Jesus to be a king of his kingdom as long as he allows us to remain king of our own kingdom. So we rule our kingdom and we do what we want to do. We take everybody's opinion except God's about how to do it and how to do it well. And the evidence for each of us is, we've all tried this, it becomes a mess in a hurry. So Pilate could have let Jesus rule the spiritual things while he could have just taken on the responsibility of ruling Judea. In the same way, we'd like to let Jesus rule in the spiritual realm and then go ahead and rule in the physical dimension of our own lives. So we'll decide to sin a little bit as long as nobody's looking, as long as we don't get caught. But it's amazing how quickly we become enslaved. It's amazing how guilt and shame sets in. It's amazing what the consequences are. Such a choice, we think, is one of neutrality, but it's not. There is no neutral ground. The truth of the matter is, when we shirk our duty to make a decision, it is a rejection of Christ's rule in our lives. Pilate tried to just wash his hands of it all. A third option, of course, and this would be the right one, is submission. Now, some people misunderstand, and they think that submission is kind of like surrendering to a demon, perhaps, and allowing the demon to speak for you and run your muscles and so on. God never does that. He never denies our personhood. The submission that he asks us to do is a submission of love. It is gentle, it is right, and it is always for our benefit, not his. So the best alternative is always that of submission in the biblical sense. We recognize who Jesus is, and we surrender to him in love and devotion. He is, after all, the King of Love. There's a song that talks about the King of Love, my shepherd is. He's also the Prince of Peace. Translates a Hebrew word, shalom, which is more than the absence of conflict. It is everything that is for your good and well-being. And Jesus is the Prince who, when crowned, brings us into the golden kingdom, illustrated by the Davidic kingdom back in the Old Testament. The truth of the matter is, Jesus is God come in the flesh. And he came not because he had to for his sake, but he had to for our sake. No other way would have redeemed us. No other way would have freed us. No other way would have restored us to what God intended us to be. So, to surrender to Jesus, frankly, is to lose nothing. It is to step into harmony and to synchronize with all of the order of the universe and all of the beauty of God's creation. To surrender to him is the equipment for freedom, for wisdom, and of course, for righteousness, living well, and developing a good character and a good reputation. As I think about this, it looks to me like we don't have much to lose. After all, he owns the universe. When we came into the world, we didn't bring very much with us. And the story is that when we leave, we're not going to take anything with us either. You know, I've done a lot of funerals. I have never seen a funeral where the hearse had a U-Haul trailer behind it full of stuff that was important to take along. So submission to the King of Kings always results in better behavior. The reason for that is because we're accountable to him. One of the problems of accounting to ourselves in our own kingdom and our effort to rule our kingdom is that we can excuse any action. We can say, well, nobody's looking. I'll just do it this one time. You know, we have all kinds of ways to rationalize a little bit of sin. It also results, surrendering to him, submitting to him, also results in better work. And the reason is because we're stewards. Years ago, I had a man come over from Grand Coulee and help me build a duplex here for staff. And when we thanked him publicly in the church, he took the microphone and said, you know, I do these kind of things because I want to serve my king. And I always do it with quality, man, quality. He wouldn't take the 59-cent outlets and switches. He wanted the $3 ones. He wanted quality. He said, I always insist on quality because I'm doing it for my king. And I want to serve him with the best that I have. What a concept. Submitting to Jesus Christ results in better decisions. The reason is because we find ourselves in harmony with him and with his laws and principles and purpose, rather than fighting against him, rather than trying to avoid what is right, rather than trying to hide in the shadows and the dark places. We can live in the sunlight and hold our shoulders back and walk proudly among other people and know that we are clean before our God. That means that surrender to Jesus also results in better character. The reason is not because we get smart or because we get just really strong or good, but it's because we are transformed by his grace into the likeness and image of Jesus Christ himself. Wow, what a concept. So, your final answer is? Because you see, each of us has to make a choice, and putting it off is a choice. Now, I'll remind you that Herod the Great reacted in denial. Oh, he didn't want to have a competitor king born, and so he's the one that ordered all the babies in Bethlehem slaughtered. It's called the slaughter of the innocents. Isn't that interesting? And so, you know, Herod the Great had the right information. After all, he asked the Jewish scholars where the Messiah was to be born, and they read the scriptures and said in Bethlehem of Judea. He had the right information, but he chose to try to wipe out the Messiah instead of accepting him for who he was. And the wise men that came from the east came in humility and in submission. They bowed down and worshiped him. They came looking for the one who was to be, frankly, the King of the Jews. History tells us that they may have had a copy of the scriptures that the Jews left behind during the time of the Babylonian captivity, and that the wise men had combed that copy of the scriptures and had read it and had some inkling about the promise of God and were watching for its fulfillment. You know, wise men in whatever culture, in whatever era of time, still recognize Jesus as king, and wise men still submit to him and his loving rule. That's the secret of life. That's what really matters. And you and I can also surrender to him. Pilate missed it. Herod missed it. The wise men did not. And the multitudes who heard him gladly Well, they were confused by his death, but after the resurrection, they knew for sure. You and I stand on this side of the resurrection, and we know for sure also. The question is, will we allow him to be Lord of our lives? Do we enter into his kingdom instead of asking him simply to fix up the mess in our own kingdom? That's what it's all about. Let's let him be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords in our lives and join his kingdom. Bow with me in prayer, would you? Holy Father, what a challenge. What a story. But it's so real. And what Pilate had to do, make a choice, we each have to do. Make a choice. We choose to let Jesus be our King. It isn't just a matter in believing that he was born a long time ago. It's a matter of believing him, to trust that his way is right and is best. And I ask that you'll bless each one hearing this message and enable them to make the right choice, and then reward them with your presence and your blessing. And I ask it in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen and amen. Thank you for joining me. May God richly bless you.